All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Leadership LRR Chats. I'm Brandon Jenkins here with my co-host Tom Brother Murray. And this week I think it's helpful to start with last week what we talked about, um, which was what do you do when you've got several things going on in your life, including some things that you're pretty passionate about, and you want to continue to pursue those things, and at the same time, the context of your life is such that it just doesn't make sense right now. And Tom and I, when we spoke yesterday, the theme that came up that's kind of related to that is this idea that as leaders, we feel a lot of weight and pressure to perform, to take care of our people, to be good stewards of all the resources we have. I mean, it can be a lot for any leader, especially the more complex your leadership responsibilities become. And a lot of times, as leaders, we got some stuff we'd like to deal with. You know, maybe some things that we need a little bit of help on. And a lot of times I think leaders out there, I know this was the case for me in the military. A lot of times we feel like we're supposed to do this alone. And we sometimes feel like if we ask for help, um, and, you know, asking for help from peers or colleagues or maybe even a boss is one thing. I'm talking about like you just feel like, man, I've got so much. I have got to do something here. And maybe you want some professional help too. And I think that a lot of times we feel like we can't do that for whatever reason. And that's kind of what, was resonating with Tom and I yesterday as we were just talking through some things like we normally do. I'll pause there and I'll say, hey, Tom, what does that bring up for you? Or what from our conversation yesterday is really resonating with you? I'll throw it over to you.
A great intro, Brandon. I think, first, this is not meant to be um, you know, uh, a referendum on mental health, uh, even though we're probably going to touch on mental health quite a bit. I think I want to start with maybe some preconceptions that I have that that are baked into, you know, not quite DNA, but baked into the way I perceive things. And I'll, disclaimer here, my spouse is a mental health provider and has been for many years. So I probably feel a little closer to this than I otherwise would. And still, there are stigmas, Brandon. We're both in our mid 40s. Even though you look way younger. We're both in our mid 40s, and for most of my life, there was a bit of a negative association with going to see a mental health provider. Right? Like, injured on the sports field, you go see a physical therapist, all good. You're getting back to fighting shape, to playing condition. But mental health was always this, like, no, we can't. We can't. That's for crazy people. That's for bad stuff. And right or wrong, that is the perception that I had for much of my life. And that I do think that our previous career, uh, didn't serve to change that, because as military pilots, going to see a mental health provider was assumed to mean that you wouldn't be able to do your job anymore, that was a likely outcome. And so all of those things cloud my judgment still today, right? You and I talk all the time that while we're no longer Navy pilots, we're no longer serving in the military, those were pretty formative years of our lives. And it's hard to shake some of that notion that, oh, I can go talk to somebody. It's hard to shake the notion that I can't go talk to somebody, seek help, get some help carrying the load maybe, because, again, in a previous life, there were potentially pretty big negative consequences, real or imagined, They were real enough to keep many of us from probably going to get some assistance with things. And so I think that's an important I don't know, groundwork or framework for how this lands with me. And so back to your intro, yeah, we're just supposed to carry it, right? Can't go get help with that. I just gotta carry it. I got it. I'll figure it out. And in many ways, that was part of the reason that we achieved the successes we did. I do think there's a limit to it, however. Uh, I went on a long time there, so I'll flip it back to you before we maybe pivot. Any way that lands differently for you? Do you have any of the same kind of preconceived notions or biases?
Well, throughout my career, absolutely. What you said resonates deeply. And I would say, man, as as a pilot, as a helicopter pilot, I didn't want to do anything that jeopardized my ability to have my upchit, which was our document we got every year from the flight doc that said we're good to fly. I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize that. And I mean, that included physical ailments. You mentioned the athlete who gets hurt and sees the physical trainer and, does what they need to do to get their body back in physical shape to play. There were times when, I hurt my back real bad. And I'm like, I'm just going to suck it up because I don't want to downshit right now. I don't want to lose the ability to jump in that helicopter and go flying and fighting the aircraft because that's what I was being paid to do. And I think that extends, of course, to mental health, which to me was like the real big one. Like if I went in with a bad back and was down for a couple days, I was pretty confident that, I could do some physical therapy and hopefully my back would get to back to a state where it would feel fine to go flying again. Um, there was a stigma with mental health, with going to see the doc about just having trouble with something mentally, like, and needing help with that. Absolutely, there was a stigma. And we may get into this a little bit later, but, in my lifetime, towards the end of my time in the squadrons, was just the beginning of finally seeing, some folks that I knew and cared about that were able to get some of the help that they needed and still continue on in their career. Um, Now let me just state right now, like, there was no policy, like, I didn't there wasn't a policy. Nobody told me I wasn't allowed to go seek this help, right? So I don't want anyone out there to think that. I'm just talking about the culture, like the way that I felt about it and interacting with my peers. There was just a stigma about it, and we just didn't go there. We just thought that we're going to have to figure out another way for that one. So, yeah, 100% all that resonates, brother.
I'm glad you said you gave that quick disclaimer there, and I was thinking the same thing. It was the culture, right? And it was the aviation culture, not the mental health community's culture, right? It was very much probably more wrong than right, but that was the culture. I think one of the results of all this, though, Brandon, for me anyway, is that I trained myself to just deal with it, whatever it was, to handle it. I got it. I'm supposed to got it, right? Supposed to be able to handle it. And so then I think I got to the point that I even struggled to be able to name whatever the thing was that was really bothering me because I hadn't ever practiced it or not in many, many years. And so struggling to be able to even name it meant, well, I can't even deal with it from a practical perspective. If I can't even look you, y- my good friend Brandon, I can't even look you in the eye and tell you what's really bothering me, well, then how the heck am I supposed to deal with it? I can't even point to it, right? Um, and so I think that's one of the risks or one of the outcomes here. And so if we can't even name it, what the heck are we going to do about it? And so um, why? I think everything just kind of gets lumped into, oh, that's hard, but I can do hard. There's all kinds of quotes from leaders of various types and in various sectors, but certainly there's plenty in the military world hard is authorized. We can do hard things. We do hard things. The only easy day was yesterday, right? There's all these phrases. And to a point, all of that is so good. It really is. And I think sometimes we just maybe overplay that hand to our own detriment. I know I have.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, brother, man, what you're saying, like, what happens? What do we start to see when there's no outlet? Like when it just keeps piling up, piling up, piling up. What are some of the symptoms of that happening?
you want my answer? You find
Yeah.
other outlets that aren't healthy, right? It's going to come out one way or another, Jenks. For me, anyway. Picture some sort of an object that's got volume. Eventually, the volume gets exceeded, and the pressure, if we want to use that analogy, gets released. And if there's not a method, a system in place to allow for an orderly release of the pressure, uh, well, it's still going to find a way out, but it may come out in a different form that's not as healthy or productive, and it may actually have the exact opposite effect of what you're trying to do, right? So whether that's short fuse, right, a short temper, whether that's and maybe, man, we wouldn't be the only people in the world that held it all together at work, and then the pressure relief valve activates at home, right? Is that right? That probably happens once or twice
Yeah.
in history. Um, or people turn to unhealthy habits, unhealthy for their bodies, whether that's alcohol or other things. And I'm not a teetotaler, but um, certainly I have done that in the past, relied on alcohol to help. Yeah, so the alternatives tend to not be good, in
Yeah.
for me personally, anyway.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
Well, beyond that, what those things that you were always so good at, and everybody comes to expect that Jenks can just handle the pressure. And look at him; he's still is excellent at his job. He's able to hold it all together. He's able to handle the interpersonal stuff, and then I think you start to see a degradation in your actual performance. Right? It might not be from the best to the worst, but it might be you're up there like excellent at your job, and all of a sudden you're missing little things. In the helicopter, we're shooting auto rotations. We're practicing auto rotations. That's that's what we have to do if you lose the engines, both engines, or if you lose your tail rotor. And as someone listening might imagine, that's can be a pretty complicated, complex maneuver, and you have to have your mind right. And maybe you start to see that performance degrade, and you get in a real bad spot, and all of a sudden, oh man, I can't do this like I used to, or like I could do maybe 6 months ago, 2 months ago, last week. So I think that even when it looks like you're still holding it all together, you may start to see smaller like degradations in performance, your ability to focus, right? Somebody comes into your office. Man, the old Jenks, I could come in. It didn't matter what I brought him. He was able to pause. He would focus. He would take it in. He would help coach me through it. Boom. The new Jenks, like something happened. Something changed. Like he was real short with me. It looked like he was on his email the whole time. I couldn't tell if he was actually paying attention to me or not. Right? Those are small changes in how you show up and, quote, are keeping it all together. And the reality is, I don't know. Are you keeping it all together? You know? So yeah. So that's what I see. Brother, anything else there? Or
No, no, I don't think so. I think I want to offer a point of clarification, maybe, just so that a viewer or listener doesn't misunderstand or take this elsewhere. I'm not saying that in those moments that the solution is advice or even therapy, right? When you, as the leader, and the leader of what, you get to define that. But when anyone finds themselves in this position of, I feel like I have a ton of responsibility, a ton of obligations, and I am not my best self right now. I need an outlet. I need Maybe you are thinking, I could use some professional mental health engagement. I'm not saying that the solution has to be that. That's a solution. I think a lot of times I would have simply benefited from I'll say a safe place, um, a place where I could be a little vulnerable, let my guard down, and work through what it was that was actually bothering me. Someplace I didn't have to pretend I was fine. If you're a leader and you're not your best self, are you probably going to try to put on some sort of are you going to make an effort to show up looking as close to fine as you can? Probably so. In front of your team? Yeah, probably. Often. What if you had a place where you didn't have to pretend that? What if you had a person, a friend, a group where you could maybe just be able to talk through things and not feel alone in that challenging situation or with that stress you're carrying? I think that's um I would have benefited from that sooner. And I've had Green Squad, I've had Ready Room Zero I'm looking down at the calendar here to remind me, I think we're at 6.5 years. And I still probably didn't have the right mental framework to share as openly with Green Squad as I could have or maybe should have in hindsight along the way, right? We're years in, and I'm probably just now being uh, as open as I could have been earlier, right? Years ago. I'll flip it back to you. Where you want to go next?
Well, right there, man. Um, th- it points back to that culture when you're steeped in it for so long, even when you have an outlet, you have a group, there's still a part that's just like, nope, I'm not there yet. Like this is nothing. Like, look, people are dealing with so much, and I think that's what we trained. Trained is probably not the right word, but we're just inculcated in this culture, this idea where we're performing and like people are dealing with really bad stuff. And is my stuff that bad? No, I'm going to keep going. I don't want to burden someone, even if it's the right room with close people, right? I don't want to burden them with this. This is nothing. And I think it takes a while to realize that, dude, it's not nothing for you. And if you're in the right room, the other people who you're talking to, it's about you, right? Like it's something you're having a hard time dealing with, and they're going to help you try to deal with that, not project, you know, that what it would be like for them or tell you that it's no big deal. I mean, maybe they were trying to lighten the mood or something. They might say something like that, but at the end of the day, they're trying to help you deal with what you're dealing with what you need to deal with in a way that you need to deal with it. Um, and so, yeah, you bring up a good point. Like, you might not. We're not saying you got to go see the shrink. Every time that life gets tough and you got a bunch of stuff building up, but having an outlet like before you need it, if possible, is incredibly helpful. Because when you're in the middle of it in the chaos, I think it becomes even harder up to a point until you actually reach like red line and you're actually falling apart. And then you're just like, I'll take anything, any type of safety net, anything. But up until that point, I think it actually gets harder and harder the more you're doing and you get busy and you're trying to juggle all these balls, right? And then it's harder and harder. You have less time, less capacity, you think, to go take a pause, take a time out, go talk to the person you need to talk to or the group that you need to talk to or whatever you need to do. Um, I think that's the key for me is like, and we've talked about this too, brother. I forget exactly what the topic was, but it was something to this effect that, as much as you can get left of it, of the problem or of the challenge, and have the support, have everything kind of built in already, the earlier you can do that, then the better off you'll be. Because when you're in the chaos and you're in the middle of this hard thing, these challenges, you're so focused, you're in it and you're so focused on trying to solve it or get out of it that it's hard to step back. It's hard to step up on the balcony and look down at the dance floor because you're like right in the middle of it. And so the more of this you can think about now, and you can try to get in the right room now and make sure you have the support network set up now, the more that you can do that, I think, then the better off you'll be when you're actually in the middle of what I would say every leader eventually is going to get up close to that line. Um, so that's kind of what I'm thinking about it right now.
I love that. I love the idea of not waiting until you're in crisis, and I probably aren't, I'm not using those words correctly. Um, I mean, as you were saying that, I'm picturing one of my older son is now at the point where he's regularly playing sports, exercising. We talk all the time with him, probably feels like at him from his perspective, about the importance of nutrition, the importance of taking care of himself, of not waiting until he crashes to realize he needs to eat, or stretching, or pick the thing, right? You can probably follow along the theme there. Why don't we do that with ourselves and stress and carrying these loads, which is exactly what you're talking about? Let's not wait for the crash to happen. Let's get left of the problem. I mean, in my own journey from Navy to business, I waited way too long. I waited until I was crashing, right? I can picture these months and months of stress building up, building up. The outlet was often at home, where I just wasn't my best self for my family. It took probably 4 months of that for me to even be able to name the actual key stressors. Not because they were probably obvious to most people from the outside, but I was just not interested in spending the time. I didn't have time, right? I was too busy. I didn't have time to sit down and reflect and really try to hone in on what it was that was so challenging, what it was that I was feeling the need to carry alone. And man, it's a work in progress. I'm not even close to where I want to be, but I'm happy with the direction we're going in terms of being able to talk to people like you, to Annie, my wife, right? But man, wish somebody grabbed me by the shoulders 25 years ago and shared this stuff with me. So hopefully somebody out there in their early 20s is picking up on this.
Yeah.
Um, Yet almost, I think some of it's self-preservation, right? Hey, if I actually name this, for me anyway, if I name this, does that make it real? And the reality for me was finally figuring out how to name the thing actually took the power away from it, whatever it is, right? And this applies for me to several things. Naming the stressor, naming the concern had the exact opposite effect that I told myself it would. And that for me was a huge takeaway, and has helped me be a little more willing to name those things. Again, I'm giving myself maybe a 3 out of 10 for my ability to do that, but I like the trend line.
Dude, that's so powerful because what you just said is, I think, it's what a lot of us experience sometimes with some of these thoughts we're having, some of these beliefs that we're carrying around in our head about how things will actually be. And it goes back to the stigma that we were talking about earlier. But what you just said was, you named it, and then the reaction, the response, what happened afterwards was like the exact opposite of what you thought would happen when you named it. And man, that's, shoot, this might be something to end on. I don't know. Um, like, what else in your life right now are you kind of holding back, asking for help, or you're not doing it because you believe that it's going to happen one way, that there's this stigma out there, which is really, I mean, what is a stigma? Again, we're not clinical experts here, right? But if I had to put it in my own words, a stigma is a belief that we are carrying around. So, back to the idea of not seeking the help, whether it be physical, mental, that we needed, as in my example, as a naval aviator, the stigma, aka the belief I was carrying around, was if I do this, I'm going to be down. I'm not going to be able to fly. That could potentially make me less competitive with my the other squadron mates who were flying. And then if I'm less competitive, what's that going to do for my career? Right? Okay. So let's go mental health. Like, oh no, you can't. The belief, right? The belief, aka stigma. I believe that if I be seen by a doc for mental health, that I'm going to be down immediately. And again, this whole progression of what's going to happen next, what's going to happen in my career, all these things that didn't happen because you haven't done anything yet, you believe that they're going to. And so because of that belief, it resulting in an action and inaction, all tied back to that belief or stigma. Again, I'm putting this in my own words. I'm positive that there's a clinical definition of what a stigma is, or a dictionary definition of what a stigma is, but that's in my own words. That's what it is, man. And I guess it's like, well, what if that's not the case? What if that belief is actually flawed or not true at all or partially true? What if you do nothing then? What are the consequences then? What do you believe is going to happen then, if you don't seek out the help? So that yeah, maybe this is a good one to end on, brother. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but like, how do we get after that stigma or those beliefs that might be stopping a leader from finding the right room, seeking help when they need it?
I mean, I think what we're doing right now is a great step. Talking about it publicly, right? This is going to go live on the internet. People we've never met are going to see this. So I think sharing is probably the most powerful thing we can do. And I think, yeah, that's probably my simple answer. Sharing, talking, being vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got other thoughts on what we can do?
Well, there's that. And then just real generically towards the end of my career, and I think this will be good for specifically for naval aviators, at least. At least I hope that it's only gone up from this point. But, towards the end of my naval aviation career, I knew somebody that had to go get some help. And, um, you know, I supported this friend of mine. I supported them, and he had support from some of his other important people in his life, and was able to go get some help. And yeah, he was not able to fly for a little bit, and then got better and continued along in his career just fine. And that was the first example that I had seen in my career, 20 years up to that point, 19 years up to that point ish, right? That you can get the help you need and you can continue along in your career. So I think talking about it, I think sharing examples where it's a success story like that, I think that's another way that you kind of break this idea that just because you're a leader, you're somehow supposed to be completely invincible and you never have hard times and you never need any help. Like, dude, you're a human. we're humans. And, leadership, it's not about that being the heroic Braveheart, Superman, Marvel superhero, whatever. That's not, you're a human. And so, human things happen. Anyway, yeah, man. So anything else before we wrap it up?
No, take us home. That was a good one.
Uh, Dude, well, thanks again to everybody who joined us, whether you joined us live or you're watching this after the fact. We really appreciate you being here with us. If anything we talked about today resonates with you, um, you think it's time you want to ask for help, like reach out to us. All right. You can find both of us, DM us here on LinkedIn or Substack or wherever you're watching this from. Please reach out to us. We'd like to continue the conversation with you. We do this most Wednesdays. Next Wednesday, I think we're going to take a break, but most Wednesdays we're here around 11:30 a.m. Eastern. And we look forward to seeing you again next time on Leadership Ready Room Chats. Take care.